Eloise Bridgerton spent 4 seasons proving one thing to the entire world. She would never play by society's rules. While every other young woman in London stepped carefully through the marriage market, hoping to be noticed, hoping to be chosen, Eloise did the exact opposite. She questioned the entire system. She mocked the rituals. She rejected the idea that a woman's future should be decided by polite dances and strategic proposals. For her, marriage was not a dream. It was a cage dressed up in silk and flowers. And that belief became the foundation of her identity. It was the reason audiences admired her, the reason she felt so different from every other character in the Bridgerton world. But the season 5 trailer just revealed something that changes everything. Because for the first time since the series began, Eloise Bridgerton does not look like someone who is running from love. She looks like someone who might actually be choosing it. And if that is true, then the biggest question is no longer whether Eloise will fall in love. The real question is far more shocking. What kind of story could possibly make the most independent character in Bridgerton break every rule she ever made? She was the one Bridgerton who refused to play the game, the one who sat in glittering ballrooms and looked at the marriage market like it was a trap disguised as tradition. For 4 seasons, Eloise Bridgerton made it clear that she would never become the kind of woman society expected her to be. She would not chase husbands, she would not wait to be chosen, she would not surrender her mind just to fit inside a life that felt too small for her curiosity. And yet, the season 5 trailer shows something that feels almost impossible to believe. Eloise Bridgerton, standing at the center of a love story that looks very real, not resisting it, not mocking it, not running from it. For a character who built her entire identity around breaking society's expectations, this might be the most shocking twist the series has ever attempted. Because when someone spends years fighting against love and then suddenly stops fighting, the real question is not what changed, the real question is who changed it. And once you start looking closely at the season 5 trailer, it becomes clear that Eloise is not just bending one rule she made for herself, she might be breaking every single one of them. For a long time, Eloise Bridgerton existed in a completely different emotional universe from the rest of her family. While Daphne was navigating the intense expectations of the marriage market, and Anthony was wrestling with the heavy responsibilities of being the eldest Bridgerton, Eloise stood slightly outside all of it. She watched the rituals of Regency society with the kind of sharp intelligence that made everything feel slightly ridiculous. The balls, the gossip, the carefully practiced smiles between potential suitors and hopeful debutantes, it all looked like a performance to her. And Eloise has never been a character who enjoys performing for other people's approval. She questioned everything. She questioned why marriage was treated as the ultimate achievement for women. She questioned why intelligence in women was tolerated at best, but rarely celebrated. And most importantly, she questioned why love itself seemed to exist in such strict rules. For Eloise, the problem was never the idea of connection or companionship. The problem was the system surrounding it. The idea that a woman's future could be reduced to a series of polite dances, whispered rumors, and strategic matches arranged by families who cared more about reputation than happiness. That frustration defined her character from the very beginning. It was the reason audiences connected with her so strongly. Because while the rest of the Bridgerton world often felt like a romantic fantasy, wrapped in beautiful costumes and orchestral pop covers, Eloise felt real. She felt like someone who could see through the fantasy and still choose to exist inside it without completely losing herself. But something important happened in season 2 that quietly complicated that identity in a way the show never fully resolved. That something had a name: Theo Sharp. Theo was never introduced with the dramatic fanfare that most Bridgerton love interests receive. There were no sweeping musical cues announcing him as the next great romance of the series. Instead, he appeared in a much simpler way, as a printer's assistant, as someone who lived outside the glittering world Eloise had grown up in. And that difference mattered more than anything else, because for the first time in her life, Eloise found herself speaking with someone who did not see her as a Bridgerton daughter first. He saw her as a mind, as someone worth debating with, arguing with, learning from. Their connection was built through conversations rather than flirtation, through shared curiosity rather than social expectation. And that kind of connection is far more dangerous than the typical Regency courtship, because once two people realize they truly understand each other, it becomes very difficult to pretend that connection never mattered. The tragedy of their relationship was not that it exploded into a dramatic conflict. It was much quieter than that. It ended because the world they lived in refused to make space for it. Eloise belonged to one of the most powerful families in London society. Theo existed on the other side of a class boundary that Regency culture treated almost like an invisible wall. Neither of them built that wall, but both of them were trapped by it. And when their connection finally collapsed under the pressure of gossip, status, and fear, it left something unfinished behind, something unresolved that the show never truly closed. For many viewers, that unresolved tension became one of the most quietly powerful threads in the entire series, because it represented the one possibility Eloise had encountered that felt genuinely different from the life she was expected to live. Now, the Season 5 trailer brings that unresolved thread back into the light in a way that feels incredibly deliberate. It does not scream the answer at the audience. It does not immediately reveal exactly how Theo fits into Eloise's story this time. Instead, it does something much more interesting. It shows us a version of Eloise that feels slightly changed, slightly softer around the edges, without losing the fire that has always defined her. The trailer frames her differently than before. The lighting around her feels warmer. The camera lingers on her expressions in a way that suggests something emotional is happening beneath the surface. And that subtle shift matters more than any dramatic declaration could. Because when a character who spent 4 seasons rejecting the idea of romance suddenly begins to look like someone capable of embracing it, the transformation itself becomes the story. But the most fascinating part of this transformation is that it does not look like surrender. Eloise does not appear to be giving up her beliefs or abandoning the independence that made her so compelling in the first place. Instead, it looks like she is beginning to understand something she once refused to consider: the possibility that love and freedom might not be opposites, that connection doesn't always mean losing yourself, that sometimes the right person doesn't trap you inside society's expectations, but helps you step outside them. And if that is the journey Season 5 is about to explore, then Eloise's story might become the most emotionally complex arc the show has attempted so far, because it forces her to confront a terrifying possibility. What if the life she rejected was never the real enemy? What if the real enemy was the fear of wanting something she believed she could never have? And if that fear has finally begun to crack, then one question becomes impossible to ignore. Who is standing on the other side of that crack, waiting for Eloise to finally look through it? The most interesting thing about the Season 5 trailer is not the moments that look dramatic, it is the moments that look quiet. Bridgerton has always been a show that understands spectacle: grand entrances, stunning gowns, violins playing modern songs while couples circle each other in candlelit ballrooms. The series built its reputation on emotional intensity wrapped in visual beauty. But when the trailer for Eloise's season begins to unfold, something feels different. The energy is slower, more careful, almost as if the story itself understands that it is handling something fragile. Because Eloise Bridgerton has never been a character who changes easily. For 4 seasons, she has been defined by resistance. Resistance to expectation, resistance to tradition, resistance to the idea that her life should follow a path already designed for her long before she was born. And characters built on resistance do not suddenly wake up one day and decide to become someone else. If they change, it happens for a reason, a very specific reason. That is why the trailer does something incredibly deliberate with the way it frames Eloise's emotional journey. Instead of showing her in the middle of dramatic confrontations, it keeps returning to small moments, moments where she looks like she is thinking, moments where she seems to be watching the world around her in a slightly different